I heard a lot of people talking about Girard and how much they liked his work, but one of the inflection point, I guess, for me was when someone recommended this particular book and said it was Peter Thiel's favorite book. And so Peter Thiel's obviously founder of PayPal. He also went on to be an early investor in Facebook. And I don't know that he's talked about this a lot, but there's a lot of thinking that it was his understanding of mimesis that helped him see the value of those business models early, in particular Facebook. So again, this is an excerpt from Girard's book, Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. He writes, "The scandalon is the obstacle/model of memetic rivalry. It is the model insofar as he works counter to the undertakings of the disciple, and so becomes an inexhaustible source of morbid fascination. This is exactly opposite to how love in the Christian sense works. As 1 John 2:10-11 reads, he who loves his brother abides in the light, and in it there is no cause for stumbling, scandalon. But he who hates his brother is in the darkness and walks in the darkness, and does not know where he is going because the darkness has blinded his eyes," unquote. So Girard means specifically a situation that comes about when a person, a group, or a mob feels themselves to be blocked or obstructed in the realization or attainment of their desires, right? Some specific object of power, some type of prestige, even some form of possession, right? Like an actual physical property or a piece of art or something that someone wants that the model possesses, right? The individual whose desires are being imitated, or even if they don't possess it, they're perceived to possess it, that the imitator feels blocked in obtaining the object of desire from the model. Yet at the same time, this person, group, or mob cannot obtain what the model has because, either they cannot displace the model, or because the rivalry between others who are also modeling their desires from the model, there's so much rivalry, right? So many people are trying to get the thing that this guy has that the others in the mob, the rivalry becomes so intense that everyone prevents everyone else from succeeding. So what's like an example here? If you imagine like Tom Brady is the quarterback, but say there's like 10 other quarterbacks that are all vying for that position, right? They all want the starting slot on the team. Well, they would try to compete on merit, right? To prove that they are the guy that should start. But there's another path where they could try to like undermine each other. The number 2 guy or the number 4 guy could try to, steal the socks of the number 2 guy or whatever the thing is. And so what Girard's getting at here is like that type of rivalry directed at a model can become so intense that it actually prevents those that are having their desires modeled from obtaining them. And so this is what he calls, this is the memetic rivalry component. Like when people start sharing their desires for a scarce resource or position or, status in the social hierarchy, whatever the thing is that's of limited quantity, that people can become very competitive over it and they start to basically step on each other's toes, so to speak. So scandalon is also closely related to the so-called crab mentality. And I'll read a quote here. The crab mentality, also known as the crab pot mentality or the crabs in a bucket philosophy, is a metaphor that describes how people in a group may try to hold each other back from success. The metaphor is based on the idea that if a crab in a pot of boiling water tries to climb out, the other crabs will pull it back down. The crab mentality is based on the idea that people may try to reduce the confidence of others who are successful out of jealousy, spite, or envy. This can lead to the collective demise of the group, as no one can achieve success when everyone is pulling everyone else down all the time. So again, if you think about this, the crab bucket philosophy, if you will, it actually doesn't serve the self-interest of the crab. If there's one crab climbing out and another crab pulls him back in to be boiled and killed with all the rest of them, it doesn't actually serve the self-interest of the one that's pulling it back in. Yet this is what we observe. I mean, presumably this is kind of a metaphor. So presumably this is what crabs do. This gets to that old saying, right? Misery loves company. So if people aren't succeeding or they're not, they'd rather just see no one succeed than to see someone succeed and the rest of them not. But that is actually counter to the collective interest of our species, right? You would want someone to succeed. You'd want one crab to get out and go on and reproduce and make more crabs, as opposed to all the crabs just boiling in the pot. The crab mentality is also similar to something called the tall poppy syndrome, which describes a cultural trait where people resent, undermine, or attack successful people. Tall poppy syndrome is a similarly metaphorical phenomenon that occurs when people are criticized, resented, or attacked for their success or achievements. The metaphor is based on the idea that a poppy that stands out from the others ruins the sight line and demands attention instead of blending in. You could put this in few words by saying it's the tall blade of grass that gets cut first. So scandalon tends to be directed at people that are different or stand out in some way. So we could almost use these terms interchangeably in a way, right? Scandalon, crab mentality, or the tall poppy syndrome. When one of these situations occurs, and it occurs often enough, there can actually be an accumulation of scandals, which again is people being blocked from the realization of their desires, that eventually so much antagonism builds up that the steam has to be let off, so to speak. Otherwise, the social fabric can be torn apart with reputational attacks, betrayal, the breaking of explicit agreements, and ultimately violence. So when this happens, all of those involved in the tangle of rivalry will turn their frustrated desire against a single victim who's widely believed to be the offender causing the original scandal. Girard calls this unconscious process of scandal reaching its breaking point and resulting in collective violence against a single target. Girard calls this the single victim mechanism, also called scapegoating. So in Girard's theory, it is the process of victimization itself, which is Satan, actually. This is so fascinating because we typically think, you hear the word Satan and it just sounds like this character that, comic book character almost that represents evil, or a fairy tale character that represents evil. But Girard is making a case that no, there's an actual interdividual psychological dimension to human being that manifests in our social dynamics as a process of victimization, right? Where we actually victimize others. We blame these scapegoats or single victims, as he calls them. We blame them for what memetic contagion or imitated violence causes, right? That's the actual source of the problem, is the imitation. But we end up pointing all of that antagonism towards one individual. So that process of victimization is like a technical term Girard uses to describe Satan. So this is Satan in both a mythological and an anthropologically technical sense, right? This is not, this is a very precise term in Girard's anthropology. So we might ask ourselves, who is Satan? Well, Satan or the devil, which are interchangeable terms in the New Testament, is often called the accuser. It is the power of accusation and the power of the process singling out and eliminating a victim in the belief that it will eliminate a community's troubles, right? That the single victim mechanism, that you can just blame all of this on one scapegoat, kill the scapegoat, and everyone will be at peace. It's again, this unconscious process. And so in the single victim mechanism, which is the satanic process of victimization, the real cause of the community's troubles is the contagion of imitation, which eventually triggers the desire to escape from disorder, which in turn eventually triggers the identification of the victim. Right? Everyone wants it to stop. Everyone, through imitation decides, oh, there's one person that's at fault here. And this person that stands apart from the mob, the tall poppy, so to speak, according to the mob's false belief, they must be eliminated to restore peace. Now, Satan is also called the quote-unquote prince, or the quote-unquote first one of this world, which we could equally say Satan is the quote-unquote principle, or the quote-unquote first law of both order and disorder in worldly affairs, according to Girard. So what does that mean, right? The prince of both order and disorder. Well, firstly, this reciprocal memetic process of victimization, which we've labeled Satan, is the first law of disorder because he represents rivalry and scandal, right? This is Satan is being rivalrous to God, right? We say rivalrous to love, right? This is jealousy trumping love in a way. And it's a stumbling block to mankind. Right? When this memetic violence reigns uncontrolled, it is pretty devastating, right? It tears societies apart. And then on the other hand, this reciprocal memetic process of victimization known as Satan is also the first law of order because he represents the single victim mechanism that is ultimately triggered at the height of the disorder. And so we could look into the Bible for some insight here. As Matthew 12:26 reads, Satan cast out Satan, unquote. So at the extreme moment just before the mob self-destructs through unchecked imitation of victimization and violence, a single target is attributed all the blame and becomes the victim of a collective murder that restores peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.